Hey everyone, welcome back to our podcast. It's your host Sivam, and today's episode is going to be an exciting deep dive into the world of prompt engineering and LLMs. We have got a fantastic guest lined up for you today. Join us is the incredible Gopal from Verizon. I have been following Gopal's insightful content on LinkedIn for some time now, and I can't wait for all of you to hear firsthand from the man himself. So let's get started. Gopal, so how did you get into this generative AI field?
Hey, Shivam. So, hey everyone. So, pretty much to start with, to give a little bit brief, before even generative AI, taking a few steps back, I am pretty much a data engineer by heart. So, started my career towards the data and then evolved into a big data engineer. And like around sometime 2017, 18 timeframe, where we started kicking in data science and ML journey as part of financial and healthcare organizations. And that's where we started getting into data science, where the ability to convert some statistical algorithms into intelligence, right? And then how do we scale that? So that is the machine learning part of it. So I've been part of this journey for quite some time now. And very recently, this generative AI has been a very good topic to get immersed into for the past 1 year. So basically, I am very much a natural language enthusiast and spend some decent amount of time understanding ecosystems like Spark NLP and different healthcare specific NLP challenges when I was part of my prior organizations. And that is how my passion towards languages got started. And when this thing about generative AI and large language models exploded after the chat GPT revelation last year, then it was a natural fit to get started, learn about it, staying relevant, and do it part of your job where applicable. So that is pretty much a summary of the journey into generative AI issue.
Great, great. That's an incredible journey, I must say. Okay, so could you tell us about any AI or LLM projects that you are part of or you are currently part of?
Absolutely right. So again, this is nothing specific, but when you think about overall maturity of LLMs itself, like the way OpenAI has invested, the amount of time that has gone into the training and evolution of this entire ecosystem is like massive. And when we want to try and replicate that either in a personal or in a professional setup at scale for enterprises, there definitely are a lot of use cases that comes as natural fits, starting from, hey, how do I start generating my digital marketing content, right? So today that has been a very big evolution in that space. How do I make sure the content writing is getting like enabled via AI. So that is definitely a very, very good use case. And when you think about it, how these language models can think and respond and be able to understand the semantics of the language. So wherever I want to get a crisp snippet from a business, wherever I want to summarize, let's say there are thousands of legal documents, enabling a question answering ability from those for anyone that requires a support, right? Today, going through these knowledge bases and understanding them has been a traditional challenge across enterprises. So how do we get that moving? So these are some areas, like widespread projects are being carried out across the industries, and I'm also like kind of learning and being part of this journey, Ashok.
That's really great. So, what aspects of this generative AI project excite you most?
So from an engineering mindset, right, I would answer this question because conventionally, if you see the setup in large scale companies, you have statistical scientists, research scientists who convert a problem statement into an algorithmic solution, and then we take those algorithms, make sure they are correctly plumbed with the data pipelines, scale those solutions so they can meet the customer or the business insights, right? But with generative AI, the challenge comes in a different form where you have the intelligence pre-programmed. There is a big box of intelligence, and the size of that intelligence, either be it an API that is available, ready to use, like OpenAI or the Claude A or the Palm model, which are available to us as APIs, or when you want the model yourself to get started with the inferencing, right? So there are specific engineering challenges, and getting a method to this madness is definitely something that is interesting. When you want to manage this at scale, serving different use cases, cost really becomes a factor with generative AI, right? Anything that we do definitely requires a humongous amount of compute, which means compute is certainly going to be a very, very expensive affair in the coming days. And in an enterprise setup, when we want to invest in that compute, we really need to know what is the return on that investment. And that is where the
Yeah.
engineering bridges this gap. And that is one thing that really passionate I'm really passionate about is how do we do this at scale in a cost efficient manner is something that we are still figuring out across multiple businesses, right? So OpenAI gave
Mhm.
us an API where anyone and everyone is daily interacting with, and we are all
Mhm.
like think about it, the number of GPUs that are getting during the inferencing and training, the amount of energy that is all getting into. How do we do that in a specific enterprise setup? And what is the methodical way to engineer that is one thing that kind of drives me in this journey.
Great, great. Okay, so as you mentioned, there is a wide variety of skill set and challenges are there. Like new challenges are there when you are building a generative AI application. So, according to your view, like what kind of skill sets an AI team should have in today's scenario to build a great AI product or generative AI product?
So skill sets, definitely we could talk about it, but even one best thing about generative AI is the democratization of the AI application, right? So
Yes.
as data science enthusiasts and data enthusiasts or AI enthusiasts, we all have been trying to get a footprint of data science and AI for different fields and different companies and different use cases. But with Gen AI, I think there is a big explosion where it's all democratized and anyone and everyone can be at the receiving end, interacting with the AI, tuning it, and being able to do all of this without prior technical knowledge to code is one big
Mhm.
advantage or one big tool that is in hands of pretty much anyone that works for a company or a freelancer or a homemaker can definitely leverage. But when you talk about specific skill sets, it starts with the primary ability to interact with this in a responsible fashion. So prompt engineering is something that is definitely picking up the ability to ask the right question as if you would expect an answer from a 3-year-old, where you tweak the question and then make them answer. That is the same way how we want the business subject matter experts who actually know the knowledge of the domain be able to interact with these models and produce uh, better responses for business insights, right? So that is one primary area where the democratization happens. So creating a structured way where different personas can interact with these models. So that is going to be the one primary thing in my opinion. Then coming into advanced nuances where we want to like start maintaining our own large language models, where inferencing and the compute complexity becomes a challenge. So anything in that area where we can do efficient engineering to manage those compute, to host these models, or even develop these models is going to be the second area where the skill sets are evolving and will evolve. And the third area is fine tuning any existing models, which is going to be an extension of the great research work our scientists and data scientists have been doing, building domain specific adapter models or fine tuning the models to solve for specific nuanced use cases is an area where extension of people who have been doing like supervised learning and deep learning are going to now also start fine tuning the models for the enterprise. And depending on the cost and the return on investment, these are going to be different patterns of different personas that where the things are evolving in this space. Shiv.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, as you have mentioned, like prompt engineering and fine tuning LLMs both are quite important as a skill set. So, in your experience, how do you balance between prompt engineering and LLM fine tuning? If you could describe with a specific scenario where this balance was particularly crucial in your case.
So when we talk about prompt engineering, right? So today, as without even realizing, there are good prompt engineers that are getting created every day, and maybe it's no longer a niche engineering. It's like prompting that is happening at scale across the world, right? So specifically, if you ask between prompt engineering and fine tuning, so prompt engineering is getting answers from your LLMs. And the the way in which it evolves is when you do it, especially in to serve for businesses or for enterprises, how you do it more responsibly and how you avoid hallucinations, right? So that is going to be one big challenge with these large language models. So the more inputs or more domain knowledge you carry, the better you are able to prompt, especially for use cases which are going to serve like specific tasks or specific subject matters. That is going to be very, very important. And doing that in a right way, creating prompt templates, as you can see, there are a lot of cheat sheets or like guides which are giving inputs on how do you interact with these LLMs and what are the right keywords to pick. What are some words that we are not going to pick during the inference? And by and large, all of these are going to be part of your inference, which means the token limits are also going to play a vital role. Just because we are able to explain a chain of thoughts, is it meaningful to provide it under each and every inference, and how is it impacting my inferencing cost? So that is one area to think about when we want to scale the prompt engineering itself. Whereas when it comes to fine tuning, the majority of your investment or the cost portion of it stays in much ahead of the cycle, right? So when fine tuning, you really require a huge amount of compute. You really need to invest a lot on how your ecosystem looks like. So you have a fine tunable environment to fine tune these LLMs. And doing that at scale with like larger data sets or like big data is definitely a challenge that we have been solving even before LLMs, and that is here to continue, because most or all of the data that is interacting is unstructured documents, images, and the multimodalities today also envisages things like images, videos that are part of your fine tuning. So that is one key difference, right? Thinking about compute upfront when you're fine tuning versus thinking about it during your prompting for inference is one key difference, I would say, when it comes to the technical implementation of these two techniques.
Right, right, definitely. So, like focusing more on prompt engineering. So, what is the best way to do prompt engineering for your project? What are the ways that we'd like to suggest to our own audiences?
So it again depends on what is the purpose of the prompt. So if it is about a casual interaction, I think there is definitely no one right answer. But depending on what is it going to solve for, right? There are casual interactions that people do on a daily basis and which need not follow a strict method to, because it becomes as if it's a virtual buddy for you, like any model that you interact with. But when you want to solve for specific use cases, there are some best practices around enabling prompt templates. So you are able to manage a customized set of prompts that are going to interact with the model, and understanding how these prompts are impacting your inferences. There could be contextual prompts which are always preceded before every inference. Then there is a context that could come out of your RAG architectures, and eventually there is a user input or question that gets appended to it, right? So how much of the effectiveness comes from each of these sections: the pre-seed, the context that is retrieved, and the user input. And how do you evaluate that and correlate that to the output is one key thing that we need to evolve or kind of automate in the space of prompt engineering, because today most of the evaluation is human in the loop with subject matter experts reviewing the results, because we don't want a system that produces 60% accuracy facing agents or customers. It's going to be a big challenge for enterprises. So how do we automate that is the second part of the puzzle, right? So getting a prompt template to standardize, and then how do you automate the evaluation of this entire interaction itself? So those are the two key tenets to take care of while prompt engineering. Otherwise, we don't want to complicate that, because we all know millions of people are interacting with these models daily, and the models are learning with how these people interact, right? So that definitely is here to evolve.
Definitely, definitely. So as you mentioned, like definitely getting the customized smart form template is one challenge, and the bigger challenge is, I think, evaluating the output, text output from LLM. So what do you think? Like, how are you solving them right now? What would be the best possible solutions?
So, in terms of resolving the outputs itself, I would say, or evaluating the outputs itself, there are multiple techniques that are being experimented across the data science community, right? Starting with a simple toxicity identifier, or it could be a profanity check that needs to happen prior to any of the interactions. So that there could be regulations that are driving these, which are conventional AI also used to have. But specifically when it comes to the output evaluation, so we definitely have a lot of libraries, and what makes sense for a given use case is something that needs to be governed by a responsible AI charter, right? So when it comes to startups or large scale companies, now we have all the intelligence ready. Anyone can interact with it. Any software application can interact with these models and produce, generate insights, generate content. But how responsible is that occurring? The models were trained, and in some cases we are not fully aware or exposed about the training data. But when those are implemented and touching your enterprise applications or software applications, how responsible is that implementation, and what are the guardrails that are being placed towards the output evaluation, right? So those are some areas that we need to constantly monitor and evolve. And currently, the RLHF and the HITL are the primary ways to get things straightened out. But as we see these hitting large scale production systems in enterprises or large scale applications of users, then there is a lot of scope where we are able to collect the behavior of these models across different parameters, across different inputs, analyze the behavior, and try to come up with a golden set of rules. Then you always have a context caching or your prompt caching, which lets you enable, when similar questions are asked again, you always don't have to go back to an inference cycle, an expensive inference cycle. You can always have a standard set of questions. Let's say we are building a bot that answers questions for users, then pretty much as good as the generative AI could become your big long list of FAQs that are generated over a period of time, which are cached and then exposed. So those are some advanced levels I would consider. But the basic to start with is how do we do it responsibly with human feedback, reinforcing that with guardrails, and then evolving that to the state where it needs to be.
So how do you collect this human feedback? Like, is it that thumbs up and thumbs down, or there is something else that we have discovered that might be helpful for us?
Can you repeat that, Shivam? Sorry.
Like that, as you have mentioned, the human feedback is really important. So today, the most famous human feedback loop is that thumbs up or thumbs down for every output that is generated. So is there any other human feedback loop or framework that you have discovered in your projects that you would like to share with our community?
So more than a framework, right? It depends on the way how we interact with these models, right? So depending on the task or depending on the subject matter, that is going to be playing a very crucial role. At least in my perspective, how a data analyst would play a role when you're building a data product is going to be the same level of inputs that we get from subject matter experts for the reinforcement, right? Let's say we are building a bot that can answer or solve for tech support questions. Then your best person to do the reinforcement is a subject matter expert who knows which system is this about and what are the different techniques, and evaluating that output answer to memorialize, right? So that subject matter expert is very crucial. When we don't have the liberty or luxury to have people support this, that's when we start evaluating how relevant is the context to the question to the output. So that relevancy is measured today using different techniques, but still there is no one perfect solution that has been carved out, at least from what I am learning and what we are exploring towards this journey.
And what do you think? Like, how can we track performance of our AI products in production when the product is?
So the main thing that comes into the picture is what is an acceptable error range, right? So whenever we talk about production or live apps, the acceptable error range is the first thing that we all need to agree on and say, hey, this is, we all have randomness in AI, and with generative AI, what is the level of acceptance or the level of error that we are able to accept, and what is it going to cost? Let's say you are building an assistant bot, and what is the cost of it providing a wrong instruction will be the first thing to consider when we build a production system. Then moving on, the first point that I touched upon, how do we do it more responsibly, right? So we can always get multiple outputs from LLMs, interacting with multiple LLMs and producing a combination. But the component of responsibility is very important when we do things at scale and when we want to operationalize this as a system integrated production application. Then finally, how do we scale, right? So today we have a lot of APIs that are available to us, but over a period of time, we are going to run into the same puzzle of, hey, what if my cloud cost increase? How am I going to handle it? Or if I'm going to do this all by myself, how my investment on my compute looks like over a period of time for next few years. So these are some key things for us to think about when we want to run this at scale in production.
Definitely. So, coming to the end of our podcast, the last question for us, like for you, is like, how do you ensure like you are up to date with the ever evolving landscape of this generative AI?
That is a very good question, to be honest with, and especially with the number of things that are happening in generally in the AI space and the engineering space, we really need a focused learning plan. There is a lot of tendency, even when I interact with my peers and team members, this is one key thing that we always discuss upon. How do I stay relevant in this big scheme of things? And how do I make sure I'm not disturbed or like feeling maybe an imposter syndrome or feeling intimidated by the number of things that are happening? So, two key things: having a focused learning path will help us get there. And definitely, the second one is there are things that will hit us and we take it as a learning. Like we come up with a path, we come up with a focused path to learn where we want to go. But when we want to do things in reality, establish this in real-time systems in production, of course there will be learnings where we make mistakes. Learning from that and moving on is definitely a philosophical answer to it, right? But LinkedIn is one space where I see a lot of people to follow and understand how various organizations, various communities, and various industries are doing this. And if at all we figure out a way how we can consolidate that content, there are some very good blogs that talk about this. So, following a few of those and making that focused is one key, in my opinion.
That's so great, Gopal. Today we have learned lots of new things from you. So thanks for sharing your experience and insights with us. It really helps the community a lot. And thanks for being here with us today. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Thank you, Shivam. Thanks, everyone.